Alright class, we got less than a week before Chapter 5 of Deltarune releases, so let's go talk about the ShadowCrystals. Yeah, that's the intro for today. I don't know what you expected. Alright, so when it comes to the ShadowCrystals, I'll just go ahead and go over all of the instances of the ShadowCrystals being used, mentioned, and obtained, all the things that happens when you interact with them, all that jazz. And I believe I have a conclusion as to what they are for and what their purpose is, but we'll touch up on that later in the lesson. So let's go ahead and start off with Chapter 1. Our first Shadow Crystal actually has its story begin before Chapter 1 is released. As you would probably know from what Sham says in his story, he was the court magician while Jevel, the secret boss of Chapter 1, who was in the basement area of the card castle, was the court jester, until one day he came into possession of a Shadow Crystal which ended up bringing him to the brink of insanity, so much so that he had to be locked up. Now, if we look at our last lesson, when I said that the Shadow Crystals seem to be able to tell the future whenever you look through them, it'd be safe to assume that whatever Jevel saw through the crystal is what drove him insane. Jevel might have seen the roaring through that Shadow Crystal and that's why he went insane. Upon retrieving the Shadow Crystal, if we look through it, it will say that we saw toys strewn about, which obviously means that it's the unused classroom, which is what the Dark World turns into after the fountain is sealed. And then outside of the Dark World, when you look through the piece of glass, which is just a Shadow Crystal, it says you see through your hand. Now, I've already had that theory about Chris dying and that being why see through the hand, because there's no body for the soul to inhabit. Though that is yet to be proven, and I think it's the safest bet, so let's continue on to Chapter 2. Alright, so I made an entire video kind of talking about this Shadow Crystal and also the character involved with this Spamton, although I do have a few extra things to say about Spamton that I didn't talk about in my Spamtail video, so there's that. First of all, when it comes to the Shadow Crystal was with Spamton the entire time and not with the robot, just the disc was with the robot, and Sham was only talking about how the robot seemed to have been a remnant of a Whitener's dream that never got fulfilled. Alright, so now that I got that clarified, it is very likely that Spamton saw himself becoming a big shot through the Shadow Crystal and sought to fulfill that, Though it could very well be a Macbeth situation where he wasn't given the full story, and it seems to show since even after becoming a quote-unquote big shot, he was still a puppet on a string and needed to be cut free by the Fun Gang. This Shadow Crystal says all the normal stuff, like, oh, you see the computer lab, and that's where you end up after sealing the fountain. In the White Road, it says that you see Susie glaring at you coldly. Now, I've suspected that this could have something to do with the soul's new vessel after Chris's death, or it could have something to do with Chapter 5, which I guess we'll have to wait and see, it's not too much longer now. Anyways, and I guess I should take a moment before moving on to Chapter 3 to talk about the Shadow Crystals and their significance. For starters, they seem to be with the most powerful beings, or at least will end up with the most powerful beings encountered in each chapter. With that said, there has to be a reason for it, right? I mean, who is it that's giving these Shadow Crystals away, and why are they doing this? Well, I would be willing to bet that it's the Knight, and I'm going to go back on something I said last lesson about the Knight being a Titan, but I'll cover that a little bit more a bit later. Instead, we're going to talk about Chapter 3. Chapter 3 Shadow Crystal is the easiest one for me to talk about because it's in the possession of the Knight, who seemingly hasn't found someone to give it to during this time. Though of course it is still very difficult to achieve because you need to do all the secret stuff involving getting S ranks and all of the boards that Tenna has you do, and then also completing those creepy games. But that's the easy part. The hard part is fighting this enemy here, who I'm just going to call Eram because, well, I found that in the soundtrack, and I wouldn't be surprised if this thing is the Shadow Mantle that you collect after beating it. After all, it goes up to where you obtain the Shadow Mantle, and it kind of looks like it too. Hell, the Shadow Mantle could have very easily been what King was wearing in the first chapter. After you defeat him, it flies off, and whatever, I'll leave that for someone else to take care of. Probably future me. Anyways, regardless, the Shadow Mantle is what allows the Fun Gang to defeat the Knight more easily, and upon defeating the Knight, well, I mean, it lowered its guard for a moment, so no, the Knight is not a fraud. It's actually far more powerful than any of us can really suspect, considering it's not even going all out. I don't think the Knight was expecting Susie to be as strong as she was, though, considering she managed to break a piece of this black knife off. and that included the shadow crystal that it was holding on to. So whether the knight gave up that shadow crystal intentionally, or it was just circumstances causing it to lose it and it wasn't what it was intending to do, I'm leaning more towards the latter, because if the knight is trying to keep the shadow crystals away from them, then why would they just give it away like that? Unless it's some sort of test. Oh my god, it's a test. No, let's not worry about this right now. Let's just go on to chapter 4, which is another easy one to talk about because, yeah, I know I'm not. Let's go just. And as for chapter 3, Shadow Crystal, you can't really look through it because there's not enough time to, and most likely I haven't tried it. I'll probably give it a try later. Who knows? Point is, if you look at chapter 2 Shadow Crystal at the beginning of chapter 3, it tells you see the TV break into pieces, and obviously we know what that means. Moving on to chapter 4, we just have Gerson Boom, who has the Shadow Crystal and the Justice Hammer there with him. He says that the Shadow Crystal just appeared in his drawer one day, and he has no idea what it's for or if it's even meant for him to have. So that very easily means that the knight put it there and expected him to keep it safe and did not just give it away, although it is Gerson. Maybe going back on that whole thing about the knight just testing them with the Shadow Crystals, then it would make sense that Gerson wouldn't just give away the Shadow Crystal unless whoever it is he's giving to has proven themselves to, you know, be strong enough to handle it. Which brings me to what the Shadow Crystals very well could be. I mean, I mentioned this in our last lesson, and it does make a lot of sense. I mean, the Shadow Crystals have no effect over the, the pains of the prophecy in the Dark Sanctuary, and I wonder if the Shadow Crystals are a part of one of these pieces of the prophecy. Although, what exactly could be on it?
What did you see in there, brother?
Path. One I had never imagined.
Anyway, okay, continuing on right after all that, the point is, if these Shadow Crystals really do contain like some piece of the prophecy or even an entirely new path to follow, that means that Snowgrave alone isn't going to change a thing, or at least not drastically enough for it to be anything substantial and worth doing. We're going to need these Shadow Crystals in order to actually do anything, and even if the Shadow Crystals don't actually form a, stained glass prophecy thing like in the Dark Sanctuary, it could very well just still make that pure crystal that will make the Twisted Sword, and obviously the Twisted Sword needs the Thorn Ring, so unless we're able to make it in a future chapter, like in chapter 6 or so, or something like that, then we're going to need to cancel Snowgrave right at the end so we can get the Thorn Ring from Noelle and continue onward with our lives. That's just something to think about. As for who the knight could be, well, I think it's very obvious. I'm just going to apply Occam's razor here for a moment and say that the knight is a tall being with pointed feet that look like hooves, with antlers on top of their head, or at least something that looks like antlers coming out of its head. The only other character who fits this description is Carol Holiday. I mean, sure, Noelle does have antlers and pointed hoof feet, but we've obviously seen Noelle in the Dark World, which, well, obviously it could also be Rudy, but given his condition and just the way he is, I don't think he would be the type to do this, which means that it has to be Carol. After all, the knight has an affinity for swords, or I guess it's black knife, but that's basically a sword. And we see that Carol loves using swords. I mean, you've been to the kitchen in the Holiday house, right? Mayor Holiday has a sword right up there on the wall that she uses. Anyway, that's all for today. I know that this lesson probably isn't as in-depth as all the other stuff, but I wanted to at least get something out before Chapter 5 releases, and this is kind of the best. I wanted to get something out before Chapter 5 releases, and this is kind of the best that I can do for now. Until next lesson, I hope you all take care, and please remember to like and subscribe if you enjoy this content. I am trying my best to grow as a channel on YouTube, and I feel like I should at least mention doing the YouTube things. Alright, with that, I'll see you when I see you.